Hi guys, it's Lauren. Welcome back to my channel. And in this video, I'm going to be telling you guys the story of Fred Grabbe. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The Grabbe family was one of the richest families in Marshall, Illinois, and most of their wealth came from the inheritance that Charlotte got from her parents. Charlotte and Fred were both very hard workers, spending hours on the farm farming their soybean and cornfields. And they also had two children, Jeff and Jenny, and they were known to take Charlotte's side whenever the two had an argument. They'd been married for 23 years, however, they once got divorced and then remarried, but their second marriage was falling apart as well. Now, to put things into perspective, Fred was 6'4", while Charlotte was very small, especially in comparison, and when the two argued, Fred did not hesitate to get a little, or maybe even a lot, physical with either Charlotte or their son, Jeff. It got to the point where Charlotte told the kids that if she had not returned to the house by the end of each workday, to go looking for her. At 42 years old, Fred had a fascination with younger women, and it was common that he would have multiple girlfriends on the side, along with being married to Charlotte. In 1981, he was dating a 24-year-old curly-haired blonde bartender by the name of Vicki McAllister. And when Charlotte found this out, she was not happy and she filed for divorce. So Fred moved out of the family house and into a smaller cabin on the edge of the property, and that's when Jeff and his wife moved in. At one point, Charlotte went to the cabin to get some furniture to bring back to the family house, and Fred assaulted her. So she filed battery charges against him. On July 24th, 1981, just after sundown, 39-year-old Charlotte did not return to the house after work. Jeff and Jenny knew something was wrong, so they went looking for her, and when they did, they found the tractor that Charlotte drove away from the house first thing in the morning. It was parked inside a machine shed with the lunchbox still resting on the front tire, and this is when Jenny reported her mother missing to the Clark County Sheriff's Department. Fred was questioned, and he did admit that the couple had been arguing. He also said that the last time he saw Charlotte was when she was driving her car towards the interstate highway. Days later, Charlotte's car was found across the border in Indiana, 16 miles away. And when the police searched her car, they didn't find any blood or any signs of foul play. One thing that they did find was a loaded handgun under the seat. Now, this is when one of Charlotte's friends comes forward and actually contradicts Fred's story. She said she saw Fred driving his truck towards the border with somebody following behind in Charlotte's car, and this somebody did not look like Charlotte. In fact, she claimed that this driver was a young, blonde, curly-haired woman. Now, on another note, investigators found out that Charlotte had a safe deposit box at a local bank. And when they looked inside this box, they found lots of notes that Charlotte placed in there only 10 days before going missing. In these notes, she wrote that she had suspicions that Fred was stealing farm equipment, and she also felt like she was not going to live through this divorce. She also included that she was terrified of Fred and his business partner, Dale Kessler. Upon questioning, Dale claimed that Fred was with him the entire night that Charlotte had gone missing. However, Jeff and Jenny were not going to give up this easily. They insisted that Fred and Vicki go in front of a grand jury. However, the two refused to talk. They were pleading the fifth over and over again, and Jenny asked if he could take a polygraph test, and again, he refused. Jenny and her husband offered a $1,000 reward for any information regarding the whereabouts of her mother, but there was nothing that came of it. The case went cold after 3 years, and even after, the reward money went from $1,000 to $10,000 to $25,000. Nothing ever came of it. Then she hired a private investigator by the name of Charles Pearson, and the first lead he went after was this mystery blonde curly-haired woman that was driving Charlotte's car. He believed that this woman was Vicky McAllister, and at this point Fred and Vicky had actually broken up. So Vicky moved to Indiana, ironically in the same city that Charlotte's car was found in. Vicky enjoyed drinking beer and playing pool, and Charles knew this, so he spent quite a few days just hanging around local bars in the area, and eventually the two met and they kind of started becoming friends. And eventually he told her who he was and the whole purpose of becoming friendly with her. And with this, she told him everything. And he explained it like this was just a weight that she had to get off of her chest. She admitted that she was indeed the one driving Charlotte's car that day. And after that, she told him the rest of the story, every single detail, and honestly, it made her physically sick just retelling it. Vicky said that she and Fred were in the machine shed that day getting some 55-gallon metal barrels for some farm work. And while they were loading them into his truck, that's when they heard Charlotte's tractor pull up. Fred told Vicky to hide behind another tractor that was also in the machine shed, and that's when he went out to greet Charlotte. And as always, the two had an argument, and it escalated to the point where Fred began strangling her with his bare hands. He went on like this until Charlotte was almost unconscious, and then he would let her go, wait for her to fully regain consciousness, and then he would start again. And this process went on and on and on until Charlotte eventually died. He then proceeded to sodomize her body while Vicky watched, and after that he grabbed a grease gun and filled all of Charlotte's orifices with grease. He shoved her body into one of the 55-gallon barrels, put it in the back of his pickup truck, and then told Vicky to follow him across state lines in Charlotte's car. They dumped her car outside a bar, drove back to the farm, parked on the bank of the Wabash River, and that is when Fred took the barrel that Charlotte's body was in, placed it near a maple tree, and started pouring fuel all over Charlotte's body until she was completely covered. And this is when he lit it on fire. The two sat on the riverbank as it burned, and it burned all night long. The next morning, they heard the search party approaching, so they quickly packed up the barrel, put out the fire, obviously, packed up the barrel, put it in his truck. They went and basically fled to Vicky's house, and then the next night, same process. Came to the riverbank, lit her body back on fire, watched it burn all night long. In the morning, Fred rolled the barrel into the river, and the only body part remaining was Charlotte's skull. So Fred picked it up, looked at Vicky, and said, "This will make good fish bait," and then he chucked the skull into the river. Now, Vicky's statement is definitely a start. It's getting them further than where they were 3 years ago. However, they needed physical evidence if they wanted a chance to convict Fred for this crime. And right now, it was just Vicky's word against Fred's. By this point, there was a new sheriff in Clark County by the name of Dan Crumrin. Now, Dan was curious if the maple tree could somehow be used to produce evidence. So that's when he asked the University of Illinois for help. They sent a plant biologist by the name of Eugene Heimlich and an organic chemist by the name of Donald Dickerson. They took samples from the branches on the tree, and they found that 3 rings deep, aka 3 years ago, the growth was a lot thinner. So clearly, the tree had gone through some type of trauma to stunt its growth around the same time that Charlotte went missing. Then they shredded the samples into sawdust. Dickerson analyzed it by using a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, which is a device that identifies the components of a sample, and in their analysis, they found the presence of hydrocarbons found in diesel products. Ultimately, 5 branches were tested. and 2 branches that were on the side that Vicky said the barrel was on showed hydrocarbons, whereas the 3 branches on the opposite side did not. And luckily, this evidence was enough to charge Fred Grabbe. One of the prosecutors in the trial was Robert Egan, and fun fact, he was actually the prosecutor in the John Wayne Gacy trial. In 1985, Fred was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And during the trial, Fred's latest girlfriend, Barbara Graham, was also there to support him. Now, Barbara had been in 2 previous marriages before, she had 3 kids, and she was also from a nearby town. A few weeks after Fred's conviction, Barbara showed up to the Clark County Jail and told Officer Mike Paulson that she had a love note to give to her boyfriend. So when Mike Paulson opened the door, she fired 5 shots and 1 actually hit his leg. Fortunately, the attempt at breaking Fred out did not work. Barbara was sentenced to 16 years in prison for this stunt, and 2 months later, Fred's house, along with Jeff's house, which was nearby, went up in flames and burned down to the ground. Fire marshals came to the conclusion that both of these fires were intentionally set, and they assumed that Fred had something to do with it from behind bars, but they had no way of proving it. Fred's lawyers filed for an appeal, and his conviction actually got overturned because of a technicality. In 1988, only a month before the second trial was set to begin, Jeff just disappeared. He had testified in the first trial against his father, and he planned to do so again in the second one. And at the time, he was on a business trip in California when suddenly nobody heard from him. He just fell off the face of the earth. When the trial date rolled around, Jeff was still nowhere to be found, but luckily Cindy, his wife, was actually able to testify in his place. Again, Fred was convicted, and this time he was sentenced to 75 years in prison, and about a month after the trial is when Jeff's body was found floating in the water at Seal Beach in California. Apparently, he had been shot 3 times and an anchor was tied around him to keep the body down, but Fred denies having any involvement in his son's murder. Vicky McAllister got the $25,000 reward, and she eventually moved and changed her name. In June of 2022, 83-year-old Fred Grabbe was released from prison on parole after only serving 37 years of his sentence. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give it a thumbs up, if you disliked it, give it a thumbs down. I don't really care. Subscribe if you're new, comment down below videos you would like to see next. Let me know what you guys thought on this case. It is just such a horrific thing, and the fact that he got away with it for so many years is mind-blowing to me. But I also find it so fascinating how they were able to get the evidence to convict him in the first place. Like, I'm genuinely curious if Pearson was not the one to come into the sheriff's department. Would they have gotten evidence? Would they have figured out what happened? Would they have cracked this case? So anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!